I want to have you step out of the content bubble because as somebody who has been blogging for well over a decade and doing a podcast every week for the same amount of time, and I work in this new agency called Miram now, as my agency was acquired last year by WPP. We are like 2,500 people, 20 countries, 40 plus offices. My sort of exposure as both a content creator and then my exposure in terms of really amazing brands doing interesting things has led me in a very different and I think suspicious direction of what it means to be great at doing content and to be great at doing digital. And a lot of this has to do with what's fundamentally happening with consumers today. And when I speak to brands and businesses about their sort of trepidation to get very, very digital or their trepidation to really explode in content, what I fundamentally hear is the same thing, is they feel like it's such a seismic shift, it's such a big and tremendous thing to do. Does that sort of resonate with you guys in the audience in terms of the work you're either trying to do or the work you're trying to convince others to do along with you, right? It's the sort of banging of the drum that we've been doing here at Content Marketing World for several years for sure. And what I've uncovered in this world is that actually what's happened is that there aren't really big changes. There's actually a lot of little changes. It's a lot of little things that have cumulatively sort of moved themselves along. And what's happened is that consumers, customers, people like you and I when we're not here but actually buying things, have become so accustomed to these little sort of nuanced things that we've become somewhat in flow with this. And we don't even see them so much as consumers as change, but rather this sort of natural evolution. And as businesses, on the other side of this, we're really fundamentally struggling with this. So I wanted to sort of illustrate this sort of little things by telling you a story. It's sort of a big story, but maybe it's a little story. You guys familiar with this? No? Okay, well, good night and God bless. Good seeing you. Good luck in your jobs. I'll see you later. So Snapchat, of course, right? And we all have sort of watched, hopefully in this industry, this evolution of a very, very unique content platform, actually. But when I think about Snapchat, I actually go back a little bit in time, and I think of this moment in time where Snapchat actually said no to Facebook for an acquisition price of what? $3 billion. I always look at my slides when I say that because it's like, I remember when I heard the news, I like could smell burnt toast and the left side of my body went numb, and I was like, you know, if you have a kid and they have a business and they came home to dinner on a Friday night, they're sitting there all having family dinner, and they said, you know, Facebook wanted to acquire us. And you're like, wow, that's amazing. It's like, yeah, they offered us $3 billion. And you're like, you won the lottery. Like, yeah, we said no. It's okay. We just ripped up that lottery ticket and said, no, we're... I mean, it sounded at the time, if you remember this moment, which wasn't too long ago, it was just a couple years ago, it sounded insane, right? Did this news hit you as hard as it hit me? Hello? Yeah? Okay, good. Or some of you like, no, like I would have totally kept going. I'm like, what? This is crazy. Like, I'm sure you can have another idea, right? Like, sell it and go. Do what you got to do. And being a marketing guy, I do what I do. I sort of dig down deep. So around this time, I was like, well, what is going on here? Why did Snapchat say no to Facebook? And I came across this really interesting graph that was one of the chart of the days from Business Insider that I love so much, and from Business Intelligence Insider, rather. And so what it's showing you is the top photo sharing sites, and this is going back to November 2013. Now you can see here that you have 43%-ish is that big blue thing is Facebook, of all the photo sharing sites in the world. You can see in green here, 7% is Instagram, sorry. And then the other 49% is Snapchat. Look at poor little Flickr. What happened there? 1%. It's crazy, eh? So if you look at the construct of what's happening in content and you speak to people who are super smart, like what's working in content, they'll tell you three things. What's really working is things that are extremely mobile, things that are extremely social, and image-based. I mean, this is really the sort of fundamental push of what customers are doing. You see this every day as we flick through, whether it's Facebook or left or right on Tinder. This is the type of thing we like. It's mobile, it's image-based, it's fast, it's quick. And actually, if you look at it from this perspective, Facebook realized that if they actually acquired Snapchat, they would actually own basically 100% of the market in which most people are consuming content. So now I ask you, was it a smart or stupid move that Snapchat said no to them? And I'm not making a judgment call because I still think it's stupid, but what I am saying is that Snapchat introduced a new way for customers to communicate to one another digitally. It enables you to send something, image, a little short video clip, whatever it is, to a friend, and then have it disappear after it's gone. Which I guess you could ask the NSA whether that's true or not, but that's another topic I'm not going to talk about. But that's the sort of spirit of it. And if you think about what that looks like, you would say to yourself, so was that a mistake, or is it the digital future? Snapchat, the future of digital? And again, we're talking about these little nuanced changes. So if you go back to 2012, I wrote this blog post about the impermanent internet. And it was very much driven by my curiosity around the early days of Snapchat. And what I was trying to sort of talk about, which I'll share with you now, is this idea that suddenly, in the internet, it shifted. We used to think, all of us, I mean, I was sitting in sessions today that are talking about you need to create content. Why? Because the more content you create, the more your brand is present when someone does a search. And Google or search is like an elephant. It never forgets, right? The more you create, the more stuff you're doing. But suddenly, Snapchat introduced something very different. Like, not everything you create you want to have permanently as a record on the internet, right? We may have just had a chat in the hallway. That's like an impermanent communication. We don't need to permanently have a record of it. You might take a picture of it and post it on Instagram, but there might be things like a blog post or a podcast that you want to have permanent. What we don't understand always as content marketers or marketers is that this new thing is fundamentally different from anything we had before, but it's very similar to what we do in our day-to-day interactions of how we share stories and how we actually tell stories to the rest of the world. And so you do have this sudden new thing that customers want. They want anonymity. I'm not talking about like hacker anonymity. I'm talking about they want moments where they're either anonymous or they want moments that are impermanent. Now, you might think to yourself, well, that's not such a big deal. I actually think it's a huge deal. Because what it means is that as brands, we have to create content within these channels. And again, now you're seeing this with Snapchat has their stories and other things that are coming along that are very different forms of content that we are forced to create, and then hence we freak out about and we have to get moving. And so the reason why I wanted to talk about why content falls flat more often and why it's not about you, it's about them, is that we don't really take the time all that often to watch these small, nuanced changes of what consumers are really doing in the marketplace and make our content affect them in those directions.